I was happiest when my boyfriend wasn't home. Yeah. Let that sink in for a second. I'm talking about the guy I lived with, the guy I was planning a future with. And every time he left for a business trip, I felt like I could finally breathe again. If you've ever felt relief when your partner left the house, you're gonna want to hear this. Because what I'm about to tell you changed everything about how I see relationships now. And honestly, breaking up with him was the easiest decision I ever made once I figured out what was really going on. So here's where I'm at right now. It's been about 4 months since I ended things, and I'm sitting here in my apartment, which is actually the same apartment we used to share, except now it's just mine. And you know what? I'm not crying. I'm not stalking his social media. I'm not wondering what he's doing or who he's with. I'm just here, living my life. And it feels good. But getting to this point, man, that was a trip. Let me back up and tell you how this whole thing went down. We were together for almost 3 years, lived together for 2 of those years. And from the outside, everything looked fine. Normal couple stuff, you know? We had our routines, our inside jokes, our weekend plans. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make you think something was seriously wrong. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about relationships. Sometimes they fall apart so slowly that you don't even notice it's happening. There's no big fight, no cheating, no huge betrayal. Just this slow fade that you mistake for normal life. And I didn't see it. Not for a long time. He traveled for work probably twice a month, sometimes more. Usually gone for 3-4 days at a time. Sales job. Always flying out somewhere, closing deals, doing his thing. And whenever he'd tell me about an upcoming trip, I'd do what I thought I was supposed to do. I'd be understanding, supportive. I'd say things like, "Oh, that's okay, I'll miss you," or "Be safe, text me when you land." But inside, I was counting down the days until he left, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. The first time I noticed something was off was probably about 8 months before we broke up. He was packing for a trip, and I was helping him, and I remember feeling this weird excitement. Not excitement for him, but excitement for me. For the empty apartment. For the quiet. For not having to think about what to make for dinner or whose turn it was to pick the show or any of that couple stuff. I brushed it off. I told myself I was just an introvert who needed alone time, which sure I am, but this was different. Because when he came back from that trip, I felt heavy, like someone turned the lights down, and I remember standing in the kitchen when he walked through the door, and he gave me a hug, and I just felt tired, not happy to see him. Just tired. That should have been my first clue. But I ignored it. Because what kind of person feels that way about their partner coming home, right? That's messed up. That's not normal. So I pushed it down and told myself I was being weird. Except it kept happening. Every single time he left, I'd feel lighter. Every single time he came back, I'd feel that weight again. And I started looking forward to his trips. Actually marking them on my calendar. Thinking about what I'd do with that time. What shows I'd watch. How late I could stay up. How I could just exist without having to consider another person. And then about 6 months before the end, something happened that really woke me up. He had this week-long trip planned, longest one he'd had in a while. And the night before he left, we got into this stupid argument about nothing. Dishes or laundry or something pointless. And it ended with both of us annoyed, going to bed on opposite sides, the whole thing. He left early the next morning, barely said goodbye. And I woke up that day expecting to feel bad about the fight. But I didn't. I felt amazing. I got up, made coffee exactly how I like it, put on music he hated, wore clothes I knew he thought were ugly, and just existed. No tension, no walking on eggshells, no worrying about his mood or his stress from work, or whether he was going to want to talk or want space. And that week? Best week I'd had in months, maybe years. I went out with friends without having to check in constantly. I ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row. I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading random stuff online. I rearranged the living room. I sang badly in the shower. I took long baths. I did absolutely nothing productive and felt zero guilt about it. I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. And then he came home. The second he walked through that door, it was like someone shut off the sun. I felt it immediately. That heaviness, that tension, that feeling of having to shrink myself back down to fit into our relationship. He wasn't even doing anything wrong, you know? He was just there. Being himself, talking about his trip, complaining about his coworker, asking what was for dinner, normal stuff. But I couldn't shake this feeling that I'd just lost something. Like my real life had been put on pause, and now I had to go back to playing this role. That's when it hit me. I didn't want him to come home. And that realization? That messed me up for weeks. Because what do you do with that information? How do you tell someone you love that you're happier when they're not around? You can't just say that. That's cruel. That's horrible. So I kept it to myself, and I started noticing everything. I noticed how I changed when he was home, how I'd lower my voice, how I'd ask permission for things I shouldn't need permission for, how I'd constantly be checking his mood before I made decisions. I noticed how I stopped doing things I enjoyed because he thought they were boring or stupid or a waste of time. I noticed how every conversation felt like work. Like I had to translate what I wanted to say into something that wouldn't start an argument. I noticed how I'd gotten so used to that tension that I thought it was normal. I thought that's just what relationships were. Compromise. Adjustment. Making yourself smaller so someone else can fit. But it's not supposed to feel like that, and I knew that. Deep down, I knew that. But knowing something and actually doing something about it are two totally different things. So I spent the next few months going back and forth, convincing myself it wasn't that bad, that all relationships have rough patches, that I was being too picky or too sensitive or too something. But every time he left for a trip, the truth would smack me in the face all over again. I was miserable with him and content without him. And you can only ignore something like that for so long. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday. Wait. No, I don't even remember what day it was. Doesn't matter. But it was a normal day. Nothing special. He was home. We were both just doing our own thing in the apartment. And he asked me something. Some basic question about weekend plans or whatever. And I felt this wave of resentment so strong it actually scared me. Not because of the question. Because of everything. Because I realized I'd been living like this for years. Because I'd wasted so much time being unhappy and calling it love. Because I'd convinced myself that this weird, tense, exhausting dynamic was what I deserved. I looked at him sitting there on the couch and I thought, I don't want this anymore. Not in a mean way, not in an angry way. Just factually. Like realizing you don't want to live in a certain city anymore or work a certain job anymore. It was clear. Simple. I didn't want this relationship anymore. And once I had that thought, I couldn't unthink it. I spent that whole night just sitting with it, turning it over in my mind, testing it, questioning it, trying to talk myself out of it. But I couldn't, because it was true. The next morning, I told him we needed to talk, and I'm not gonna lie. That conversation was brutal. Not because he fought me on it or because things got ugly, but because I had to say out loud what I'd been hiding for months. I told him I wasn't happy. I told him I'd been feeling this way for a while. I told him about the trips, about how I felt when he left and how I felt when he came back. And you know what he said? He wasn't even that surprised. He said he'd felt the distance too. He said he'd noticed I was different. He said he'd been wondering when I was going to finally say something. Which honestly, that made it worse. Because it meant we'd both been living in this weird limbo, knowing something was wrong but neither of us brave enough to end it. We were both just going through the motions, pretending, hoping it would magically get better without either of us having to do the hard thing. But it doesn't work that way. So we ended it. right there, that day. And he packed his stuff over the next week and moved out. And it was sad and weird and awkward, but it wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no door slamming, no hatred, just relief on both sides. And now here I am, 4 months later. You want to know the weirdest part? I don't miss him. I thought I would. I thought I'd have those nights where I'd cry and wish he was back and second-guess everything. But I haven't. Not once. Instead, I've just been living. And it's wild how different that feels. I wake up now and the first thing I feel is peace. Not anxiety about his mood or stress about our dynamic. Just peace. The apartment is quiet in a good way. Not lonely, just calm. I do whatever I want whenever I want. And I'm not talking about going crazy or being reckless. I'm talking about stupid, simple stuff. Like watching 3 episodes of a show he would have hated without feeling guilty. Or eating weird snack combinations that he would have made fun of. Or leaving dishes in the sink overnight because I'm too tired to deal with them and nobody's gonna give me grief about it. It sounds so basic, but it's everything. I've started doing things again that I'd stopped doing. I'm painting. I used to love painting and I just quit. Because he didn't get it. Because he'd make comments about the mess or the smell or how it was taking up space in the apartment. So I stopped. And I didn't even realize how much I missed it until I pulled out my old supplies a few weeks ago and just started. And it felt like coming home to myself. I've reconnected with friends I'd let fade away, not because he told me I couldn't see them, but because I was always so drained from managing our relationship that I had nothing left for anyone else. Now I actually have energy for other people, for conversations that don't feel like work, for friendships that fill me up instead of empty me out. I've been sleeping better, eating better, moving my body more. All that stuff people tell you to do after a breakup. But I'm not doing it because I'm trying to prove something or because I'm trying to get over someone. I'm doing it because I actually want to. Because I have the space and energy to care about myself again. And the crazy thing is, I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until I got out. That's what nobody tells you about relationships like this. They're not abusive. They're not toxic in the obvious ways. There's no screaming or cheating or anything you can point to and say, that's why it was bad. It's just this slow drain, this constant low-level stress, this feeling of never being quite comfortable in your own life. And you get so used to it that you forget what it feels like to be at ease. I forgot. For years I forgot. But now I remember. And I'm never going back to that. People keep asking me if I'm dating again, if I'm ready to get back out there. And honestly, I don't care. I'm not avoiding it, but I'm also not looking for it. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely okay by myself. Actually, more than okay. I'm good. I'm solid. I'm complete. And that's not something I would have said a year ago. A year ago, I thought I needed a relationship to be whole. I thought being single meant something was wrong with me. I thought partnership was the goal and anything less was failure. But that's garbage. Being in a relationship that makes you small isn't better than being single. Being with someone who dims your light isn't better than being alone. Staying because you're scared of starting over isn't love, it's just fear. And I was so scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of wasting the time I'd already invested. Scared of admitting I'd made a mistake. Scared of what people would think. Scared of having to start my whole life over in my 30s. But you know what's scarier? Waking up 10 years from now and realizing you spent a decade being miserable because you were too afraid to leave? That's what I was heading toward. And I'm so grateful I woke up when I did. Look, I'm not saying my ex was a bad guy. He wasn't. He was just wrong for me, and I was wrong for him. And we stayed together way longer than we should have because neither of us wanted to be the one to admit it wasn't working. But it wasn't working, and pretending wasn't fixing it. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes two people can care about each other and still be completely incompatible. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let go. And I know that sounds like something you'd see on a motivational poster. But it's true. Since the breakup, I've learned more about myself than I did in the entire 3 years we were together. I've figured out what I actually want, not what I think I should want or what looks good or what makes sense. What I actually want. And it's different than I thought. I want someone who makes me feel bigger, not smaller. I want someone whose presence adds to my life instead of complicating it. I want someone I'm excited to see come home, not someone I'm relieved to see leave. I want ease. I want partnership. I want someone who gets me without me having to constantly explain myself. And I'm not settling for less than that. Not anymore. Because I know what the alternative feels like. I lived it, and I'm never doing that again. Here's what I want you to understand if you're going through something similar. That feeling you're having, that little voice telling you something's not right, listen to it. I ignored mine for almost a year, and all it did was make everything harder. You're not crazy for wanting more. You're not broken for not being happy. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. And if you're happier when your partner isn't around, that's not a rough patch. That's not something you can fix with better communication or couples therapy or trying harder. That's your gut telling you the truth. The hardest part isn't the breakup. It's admitting to yourself that you need one. But once you do, once you actually take that step, everything gets clearer. The fog lifts. You remember who you are. You remember what peace feels like. And yeah, it's scary. And yeah, it's hard. And yeah, there are moments where you question everything and wonder if you made a huge mistake. But those moments pass. And what's left is you. Just you. Standing on solid ground. Breathing clean air. Living your actual life instead of some weird performance of what you think a relationship should look like. That's worth it. You're worth it. And I promise you, there's so much life waiting for you on the other side of that fear. So much good stuff. So much peace. So much room to grow and breathe and be yourself without apology. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it. I did, and I'm so glad I did. 4 months out, and I'm not even the same person anymore. I'm better, stronger, clearer, more myself than I've been in years. And if I can do it, you can too. So if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, this is your sign. This is me telling you what I wish someone had told me. You don't have to stay. You don't owe anyone your happiness. You don't have to keep trying to make something work that's breaking you. You can leave. You can start over. You can choose yourself. And on the other side of that choice, there's a whole life waiting for you. Your life. The real one. Go get it. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more honest breakup stories. And remember, you're stronger than you know. Bye.